Willows are among the few trees where there are separate male and female individuals, which means that cross-pollination must take place with all the genetic advantages that brings. But the downside, of course, is that only half the trees can produce seed. And like most trees, they flower in the spring so that the canopy of leaves doesn't get in the way of pollen being carried on the wind, or in the case of willows, of insects being able to see the flowers from a distance, because unlike most forest trees, willows are insect pollinated. In fact, they produce the most abundant pollen and nectar for insects at this time of year. We have 11 species in Ireland, out of about 400 worldwide, and lots of hybrids between them, which makes it a difficult genus taxonomically. Some of our 11 species are little more than shrubs. The most common species of tree stature in the wild is the goat willow, so called both in English and in Latin because it was traditionally used for browsing by goats. Notice, however, the way the branches are kept well out of reach of goats. This is a female tree. The male tree is more conspicuous because of the furry appearance of the catkins, which explains its alternative common name of pussy willow. The tallest and most stately of our native willows is the white willow of riverbanks. But perhaps the most familiar willow is the wonderful weeping willow of gardens, which came originally from the north of China. From its native home here, it spread across Asia and eventually along the Silk Roads into Europe, where it has been cultivated now for thousands of years. The male catkins are not dangly, as the catkins of wind-pollinated trees are, and they don't have little trays under the stamens to gather the falling pollen until a gentle breeze can waft it away. Each male flower consists of 2 stamens, borne on a black-tipped scale fringed with long silvery hair. At the base of each flower, notice the prominent green nectary. Each female flower has just a single carpel, rather like a hairy flask, also borne on a silk-fringed scale that tapers upwards to a forked, rather cork-like stigma. Later in the year, the fluffy fruitlets will be used by birds in nest building. Visiting insects, mainly bees of all sorts and hoverflies, have a preference for the male flowers because their pollen is the only source of protein for their young, especially in the case of bees, and for the development of the reproductive tissue in hoverflies. Here, however, an early bumblebee is busily gathering nectar from female flowers. Willows are among the most important trees for the support of biodiversity. No fewer than 450 species of insects and large invertebrates have been recorded on willow, including over 150 butterfly species, more than 100 species of bees and wasps, and no fewer than 115 species of larger moths have been recorded on willows, making willows the most important plant for larger moths. Among the most striking species that feed as caterpillars on willows are the puss moth, the eyed hawk moth, and the sallow kitten. Willows are among the easiest of trees to establish from cuttings. So if I stick this stem in the ground, just like that, it will grow into a tree in no time, because willows are also among the fastest growing of trees. This great tree here in Burghcastle Domain is only about 90 years old. It was planted back in the 1930s by the 6th Earl of Ross. And they're also economically important trees, although not as important as they were before the invention of plastic, because baskets of all sorts were made from the pliable stems of willow. They were used for thatching, they were used to make wicker furniture, they're still used to make the best baskets for hot air balloons. The soft timber was used to make all sorts of smaller items like clogs, for example. Cricket bats are made from willow timber, and the best artist's charcoal is made from willow. Indeed, it's not all that long ago since in parts of the Midlands here, every rural household had its little patch of osier willows next to the kitchen garden for making baskets, and there was always somebody in the family who could weave the rods to make baskets. Medicinally, willow bark was used as aspirin long before aspirin was discovered. In fact, the scientific term for aspirin is salicylic acid, which comes from the Latin word for willow, which is salix. In the tree lore of early Ireland, willows were classified in the second rank, and it's one of the tree names that occurs most frequently in place names. For example, not far from where we are here, in Burcastle, is the townland of Dernshallow, Dura an Salyuk, the willow wood. And willows crop up all the time in folk tales. Nowhere more memorably, I think, than in the story of the legendary King of Ireland, Lowry Lynchuk, who had the ears of a horse, which he managed to conceal by letting his hair grow long and having it trimmed only once a year by a barber who was immediately executed. Until one year, the chosen barber had a widowed mother who pleaded with the king to spare her only son, which she agreed to on condition that he breathed the secret to nobody. But the secret weighed so heavily on the poor man's shoulders that he pined away and was in danger of dying, until a druid advised him that he would be cured if he went into the forest and whispered the secret to a willow tree. So he did this and was cured. Unfortunately, the king's harpist, Craftina, a few days afterwards needed a willow tree to make a new harp, and he selected this tree to which the secret had been whispered. And when the harp was played, the only song that came out of it musically was Lowry Lynchuk has horse's ears. The good news is that the story had a happy ending, because this brought the king to his senses, whereas you and I might well have gone after the barber.